Yeah.
webinar.
Awesome.
People will start coming in. We'll start probably in like 5 minutes.
Oh wait, resend the check-in code also.
Oh yeah, awesome.
Yeah, to everyone coming in, hi, welcome. We'll be posting the check-in code shortly.
Oh, it's in.
Wait, that only went to panelists. Resend it to.
Oh, okay, that makes way more sense. Let me fix that. I'll just post it like, I'll put it at 6:05, so then I'll do it.
Oh yeah, quick note, Adam. I know we're already recording, but to make it easier for the events team, like today, can you restart the recording so that it starts when the workshop starts, so they don't have to cut it for you?
Sure.
Yeah.
And one thing, and I'll ping Aaron about this, but it's been requested that this gets published on a private link.
Okay, that seems good.
Yep. Cool. I think we can get started now. Awesome. So to everyone coming, thanks for coming. With me here today, we've got Gillian O'Brien, founder at Cherry and currently a chief of staff at Dover. Real quick, Gillian, if you want to talk a bit more about both Dover and Cherry, I'm gonna leave it to you.
Yeah, totally. So yeah, I started Cherry in 2018, November 2018, alongside my sister, who is an engineer and who was our CTO, and I was our CEO. We started the company by going through Y Combinator. So before we really had a product launched or anything like that, we went to Y Combinator with the idea and went through their winter 19 batch. So it's been almost 2 years now since going through YC. And yeah, we were alive and operating for about 1.5 years. We launched 2 versions of the product. We sold into 40 companies. We had about 1,000 users, 5K in MRR, and an 88% user retention or engagement rate with our product. So it was pretty interesting and accomplished a lot in a short time with just 2 people. But our business was about helping employees choose benefits and creating sort of a flexible perks platform for people. And that did not stand up very well in COVID times. So right as we were raising our seed, COVID hit and sort of, classic COVID sob story, we ended up having to shut down. So after being a founder and sort of going through that experience, I had a career journey of figuring out what I wanted to do next. And I landed at Dover as our chief of staff. So still working in the people ops space. Dover is a recruiting tech company and doing very similar things to what I was doing with Cherry. So I work with our CEO as a team of 2, sort of supporting him in everything that he's doing and working across all of our departments. Dover is a startup with about 20 people now and growing super quickly, already profitable, and also a YC company. So I can speak a lot about both experiences.
Awesome. And just for those who don't know what Y Combinator is, do you mind explaining, a bit about Y Combinator?
Yeah, totally. So Y Combinator is an accelerator program. They invest somewhere between $120,000 and $150,000. They sometimes change it, so I'm not sure what the current status is, but they invest that amount into a couple hundred companies every twice a year, I guess I should say. So every summer and every winter. And they are potentially the most famous accelerator in the world. It was started by Paul Graham, and they have invested in Airbnb, Dropbox, Segment, Cruise. Tons of really famous companies and famous entrepreneurs have sort of come out of that program. And yeah, so everyone always wants to sort of be a part of it. It is like the accelerator, and the acceptance rate is famously less than that of like Harvard and Stanford. I think they have a less than 1% acceptance rate. And tens of thousands of companies apply every year, but it's very student friendly, and more students are applying.
Wow, that's awesome. And it definitely sounds like, you have a lot of experience just knowing what, is needed. And I think that's great. And I guess to take a further step back, maybe if you want to talk a bit, how did you become an entrepreneur? Where did these, roots kind of start from?
Yeah, totally. So I guess that it all started during college. When I was in school, I was just not really like the academic type. So I love learning, but really don't like classroom environments or tests. I like to be really hands-on. So I did my best to kind of take as much school as I could, like during the winter, like off season, and during the summers, so that I could graduate early or sort of be part-time at the end of my college experience. And during that time, I just really was eager to like get into the work world and start having those experiences. And I saw that a lot of companies around me, I went to NYU, so I was exposed to a lot of businesses. A lot of those companies needed social media help, and they saw like a college student as the perfect person to do that. I think that this is still true, and companies are always looking at like college age kids or young adults to sort of be their brand voice and help them reach audiences like that. So it was just a good place for me to start. And after I had some exposure working with some startups on their community and social media, I sort of spun that into like a little consulting business and worked with a bunch of different clients. I loved the experience of working for myself. And so once I graduated and entered my first full-time role, I got disillusioned with that really quickly and just decided like, screw it. I want to just start another company again. So yeah, that's kind of how I got into this.
Awesome. So it definitely sounds like, in NYU, you got the opportunity to just experience, I guess, the social media side of many of these startups. And I guess part of that, you got to see a lot of different cultures. And I guess I'll jump a bit ahead to, I guess, what you're doing at Dover, where you're focusing more on the culture side. But from these startups, from these various things you've done as a college student, how have you taken anything from that to kind of build culture at Dover?
Yes, definitely. So I think that this is a big lesson that I learned kind of over the past 5 years. I think that there is so much pressure on college students to know what you want to do and have a clearly defined career path and get on that path and stay on that path and be building towards something. And my career kind of took pivots or turns many times. So I have kind of dipped my toes into a lot of different industries and a lot of different sort of business functions, and had a lot of different ventures that succeeded or failed. And all of those experiences have definitely lent themselves to me doing what I'm doing now. So being a chief of staff is really like being a generalist and being able to do a lot of different things and plug into a lot of different areas. And so my experiences doing all of the different things that I've done, working with all of these different companies, trying to like work on different businesses, learning about different areas has really helped me a lot. And certainly like working in or observing cultures of the startups that I worked for has helped me kind of figure out the difference between like a good culture and a toxic culture. And that's a lot of what's built into Dover right now.
Gotcha. Thanks for that. And I guess kind of going back to your experiences with Cherry. How did you initially get into this space, and how did you start thinking about Cherry?
Yeah, so I mentioned that right after I graduated, I was super excited to just start working and get a full-time job. And it kind of made sense for me to take a role in social media marketing. So I ended up being a manager of social media and influencer marketing at this fashion startup called Therese. And with all of the experience that I had had kind of working on social media for other startups, it just seemed like a natural next step. And I was super excited to have a full-time job and kind of get into the workforce. But like I also mentioned, I got disillusioned pretty quickly. So started with a ton of energy, but after a couple of months, I realized that I was just sort of being siloed, naturally into this one area and not really getting to learn about other business functions and just sort of the high level, what was going on, why we were doing the things that we were doing. It was more just about sort of getting in and executing and getting out. So I felt like I had kind of reached a plateau and I just wasn't really learning that much anymore. I really wanted to keep growing and grow my skills and feel that I was having a big impact. And because I wasn't really getting that at the company I was at, I just kind of started daydreaming about, maybe working for myself and maybe having my own startup and how differently sort of I would do things, compared to sort of how I was experiencing them at my company. And so it started out as that, and sort of serendipitously, like you have to sort of be available, like for luck to happen to you, I think. And my sister, who is an engineer, was also sort of getting to the point in her career where she wanted to branch out and do something different. And so the timing was just really right for us. And we would be spending a lot of time together and kind of fantasizing about starting a business. And I think over time and through those conversations, it just became more of a real possibility. And we saw that, maybe we actually could do this. A lot of it was just sort of hyping ourselves up to get over the imposter syndrome and say, why not? Why not us? And I think that once we kind of had the conviction to do it, we just spent a lot of time figuring out what we wanted to work on, where there was sort of founder market fit, like where our skills were actually going to make a difference in a given area, and figuring out sort of what needed to be done to get that idea off of the ground. So that's how I stumbled into that. And through those conversations as well, we talked a lot about our work experiences and our current companies and how we would do things differently. And one of the things that came up a lot was benefits. We saw that our companies were just spending tons of money on benefits that none of the employees were really using. And that's sort of where we thought, well, maybe there's a business opportunity for companies to save money by putting this back into the hands of the employee and letting them choose their benefits or choose their perks. And it happened that there was a lot of credit card technology that was also sort of coming about at that time, and a lot of direct to consumer businesses that were making the move B2B. So there were just sort of this confluence of events happening in tech that created the right timing for us to sort of move in on that area.
Gotcha. And I guess one thing to mention that's really impressive is that you guys got this far, raised over 700,000 in seed, and it was just the two of you. It was just this really small team. I guess, what challenges did you face, and what benefits did you kind of face regarding this really small team size?
Yeah, the size of our team was definitely a challenge, especially because we were just really one in each area, like one person in engineering, one person in sort of business facing or customer facing. So I think that we struggled with so much burnout. There was just a lot that we were requiring of ourselves that was definitely not sustainable. I think that the positives were just, whenever you are going to start a company with another person, like you want that relationship to be extremely solid. I think similar to like divorce rates, half of all co-founder relationships end and is the reason that companies fail. So, just kind of having her as my sister and having all of the history that we had and knowing each other as well as we did was really helpful. They also often recommend that, you know, you start a company with a really close friend or just someone that you work super well with. So I think that that was the benefit of our team, is just how well we knew each other. But the challenges were definitely just kind of finding a way to scale ourselves. And also, like, as you can imagine, there's so much pressure that you put on and guilt that you have every time that you step away from work, because at that early stage, the work is you. So if you're not there and present and, you know, doing everything that you can feel as though like you are going to be the reason that like the company ends up collapsing. So it can be a lot of pressure. I would recommend getting out of that phase as soon as you can. But yeah, that takes a lot of money.
Mm-hmm. And it definitely sounds like, you know, burnout and you know, guilt, as you like to talk about it, definitely was something that was always looming over you guys. You know, how did you manage to power through, you know, scenarios of, you know, having this huge roadblock in the way constantly?
Yeah, so I think everyone kind of goes on their personal journey with this. So it's challenging because definitely in the startup space in particular, it wasn't that long ago that, you know, sort of like working to the point that you get sick was like really romanticized, and stories about, you know, I'm thinking about a story of Sam Altman, like, who got scurvy during working on his first startup because he was just like so focused and like forgot to eat fruit. I don't know. Or like, you know, situations, a lot of the really famous founders will tell you about sleeping on the floor and eating Pop-Tarts and like having 2 cents in their bank account. And that often gets like glamorized, and you feel as though that's kind of the only way for you to work to be successful. But at a certain point, I think that you start looking around at the other founders who are doing really well and their business is actually advancing. And you see that they're taking really good care of themselves. They're making sure that they get their exercise and they get their sleep and they see their families and they have a social and a personal life, and that their emotional well-being and health is really good. I think that that's necessary for your company to do well. And I think that everyone just kind of maybe has to go through that initial pressure and then kind of hit their breaking point and realize that that's unsustainable, for them to sort of get on the right bandwagon of making sure that they putting themselves as the main priority, making sure that they're good, and then their company will be good as a result of that.
Gotcha. Thanks for sharing. I know it's something a bit more personal, so definitely appreciate you talking about that. I guess another part of you, you know, working as a really small team is you talk a lot about, you know, wanting this responsibility that you couldn't really get at these larger startups, larger companies. And, you know, now that you kind of had this freedom to learn and do a lot of different things, I mean, you must have learned a whole lot, I guess, out of the many things you did. I mean, what did you enjoy the most? And, you know, what thing did you learn that you feel like you enjoyed the most or think most important?
Yeah, so I think that when I was working at Therese and sort of at that point in my career, all I had ever done was influencer marketing. One of the things that I was really interested in was just like understanding how businesses work and how goals are set and how to sort of even determine success or failure. Knowing like when something is going to be popular in the market. And I just didn't even know what I didn't know. I didn't know how to start. And something else that I really wanted to break away from was that when you are like someone fresh out of college, a lot of times like there's sort of an attitude that you're treated with, which is like a lot of mistrust. Like you are not expected to be the expert. You are not really someone whose opinion necessarily people are going to value. And I felt that, and I just did not want to be held back by that. I knew I didn't have any experience, but I just, yeah, I was really impatient, and I really wanted to be in a position where I could make those decisions and learn those things anyway. So definitely, like when I started my own company, one of the first things that happened was suddenly like I'm having very kind of high level business conversations. So we had a lot of like directors of partnership or like global heads of marketing of these large companies like Audible reaching out to have conversations with us. That was just something so cool that I got exposed to that I really enjoyed. Talking to investors, like the very same investors who, you know, were just casually kind of giving millions of dollars to startups that, you know, I know or use on a daily basis was also something really cool and interesting that I got exposed to. And then just, you know, kind of like making these sorts of like day-to-day decisions with funding, like with the money that we had, like deciding where to put it, hiring people, like we hired a designer to kind of work on contract and create a bunch of things for us. So being in charge of those resources, like these are just things that I had no idea about before. So the pure exposure to sales, customer success, investors, financing, legal, that was all really valuable. But I think at the end of the day, the thing that I most enjoyed was just talking to users. So once your idea has actually come to fruition and it's out there in the world and someone uses it for the first time, it's just so thrilling and exciting. And yeah, just knowing that people were actually using this thing that we made and getting to talk to them and try to give them a great experience was definitely my favorite part.
Yeah, it's definitely good to see, you know, I think personally, also like seeing the impact of many things, especially here at ACM as well, has been a really exciting thing for us as well. And I think with Cherry, you know, a huge part, you guys grew a pretty big customer base of 1,000 companies, and kind of going on that last part, you know, your most favorite part of Cherry, I guess, or working at Cherry, how did you manage to find these users? How did you manage to market to them and build this early customer base? You know, go ahead.
Yeah, so a lot of the appeal of Y Combinator is the network that you're going to get, and a lot of B2B companies will go through Y Combinator for this reason. You know, you're in a batch with a bunch of other startups, and if you are selling to startups, it's just a great environment for you to be in to get your first few customers. That was the experience with us as well. So, you know, as soon as our product was launched, we had this whole network of people to try to sell to. And because they knew us, you know, they were a lot more open to trying it out. And so, yeah, that's how we got our first several users. And then I think that we just started to kind of have a bit of a reputation. We got some press, we were in TechCrunch, and we started just to kind of be more known. And so more of our sales started coming to us inbound, and people were reaching out to us to learn a little bit more about the product. And that's sort of how we got some of our larger customers. But yeah, those first experiences when someone is, when people show up and they're actually using your thing and they think that it's valuable, is just a great feeling.
Mm-hmm. For sure. And I guess kind of on that note, I think something really interesting is that you guys applied to Y Combinator, and even before you guys had a product launched, you already, you know, you managed to get accepted. I mean, maybe talk a bit about that. You know, is there a secret? You know, what do you think the reasons were? Yeah.
Yeah, totally. We were really, really early, but that's not necessarily rare for YC. So Y Combinator accepts all different kinds of companies. They do accept companies that are at the very beginning. They don't really have any traction yet, all the way to like companies that already have 20 employees and they're already profitable. So I think that should sort of be encouraging for, you know, anyone here who wants to apply to Y Combinator or is interested in doing something like that. YC really invests in the team and the potential of the team. And there are a few key things that they look for. So they are looking at the relationship between the co-founders. They're looking at like your passion and your enthusiasm and your energy, your experience. They are kind of looking at the quality of your idea. And really, I think what they're trying to just get a sense of is your potential. And there's a other list of things that they look for too. Like they do like to see 2 to 3 co-founders. They like to see that one of them is technical. And I think that we just sort of had the right recipe of, we're sisters, where we have like a technical person on the team, and we have a pretty good idea and we seem coachable. And I think that that's ultimately what excited them about us and our idea. And I think too, like they are really interested in diversifying YC. So having like a fully female founded company as well was like probably something that worked in our favor.
Gotcha. I guess kind of on that note, that you guys are a fully, female team, something that one of the challenges in funding, I'm sure is, there's probably a lot of gender discrimination and only recently in like maybe the recent decade, and I could be wrong about that, women are starting to make more traction as founders and, in higher business positions. What's your experience being in such a position and, being in a more pioneering position?
Yeah, so you're definitely not wrong about that. I will say, I think, having a fully female team, what worked in our favor with YC, but I think that was the last time that it ever worked in our favor. I think that, once it actually came to trying to raise venture capital, like from actual firms, it was really, really challenging and we never actually did it. So the 700K that we were able to raise was from angel investors. And, we had acquisition discussions before we shut down, and we had investors kind of committed before we shut down, but getting that actual venture capital, like we were never able to do. I do think that there were a lot of tough conversations that we had, or, just like small moments, whatever, like micro moments that were frustrating. I think that the pressure was really on us to know our numbers inside and out. And we were really asked questions that most other founders were not. It was also a little bit more obvious to us because our space was competitive and companies that had a male founder much more easily got funding. And companies that, had not launched products or had no revenue got funding before we did with a product and with revenue. So those sorts of things are definitely really frustrating. But, we did our best to understand what are people thinking of us, like when we walk in the room, what are their biases about us, and like how can we try to undercut that immediately. So it's a challenge, and it's something that we haven't necessarily solved for yet. But you just got to do your best. And I think that with time and experience, these things get a little bit easier.
Gotcha. And a question on angel funding, just for the people who don't as much understand. Maybe you could explain a bit about, angel funding, and maybe a bit about the story of how you found angel investors and, how you kind of reached out to get funding.
Yeah, so angel investors are different from VCs. Venture capitalists are, they have funds, so they have limited partners like universities or super wealthy families that they're raising money from, and then they're investing that money. Angel investors are investing their own money. So they are usually high net worth individuals. And basically they say like the money that they invest in you is like the money that they would spend on a vacation, because they know that they're probably never going to see that money again. So they will invest anywhere between like 5K to a few $100K, like maybe 200K is like, and where maybe an angel investment would stop. Once you're doing like 500K, you're pretty much like leading or co-leading around. So yeah, in terms of how we found our angel investors, we did find most of them through YC. So the other huge value of Y Combinator is just getting in front of investors. We did not have our own contacts that we were going to be able to go to. We definitely like reached out to some family and friends, which is what's recommended, right? Like the people who know you the best are definitely going to take the biggest chance on you. And we did get a little bit of money from some people that we knew. But when it came to actually getting investors like Jude Gamilla or Mathilde Collin, who like had invested in other companies and had more like brand recognition around their name, we found them through Y Combinator during our pitch day.
Gotcha. And kind of on that note, once you had, you got like around 5,000 or no 500,000 from, or and 700 total from your funding. One of the questions is from our anonymous forum is, what's it like, to have the 700K? Did you get that money outright, or was it something that was given to you over time? How did that work?
Yeah, so that it's definitely a weird feeling, like having a bank account with that balance in it. And I think that basically what had happened is, this was from multiple angel investors. So this wasn't just one person who had given us this amount of money. We raised from a number of different angel investors who gave us checks ranging from like 10K to like 200K, like I had mentioned. And so, yeah, it kind of came in over a period of like about a month or 2 months. And yeah, we were just sort of raising as much as we could from whoever we could talk to. And basically, once we would sort of have that initial pitch conversation, if they came back and said, okay, I'm ready to invest, we would send them a SAFE, which is like a legal agreement that basically is a agreement for future equity. And then they would just wire us the funds. And yeah, it was pretty straightforward.
Wow. That's definitely impressive. And I guess kind of moving on, as as you mentioned very, very early, unfortunately, Cherry did have to close. And I guess you must have had a lot of time to take retrospective, and I guess part of it, what was the biggest takeaway that you might have had from Cherry, and why did you, what would you say, like, if you could do this, start like from the top, how
Yeah.
would you approach it? Would you approach it differently, or maybe the same?
Yeah, so I think that something that got in our way was just the lack of context. Like we knew nothing. And I think a lot of founders like start in that place and they have no idea what they're doing, and they continue to sort of like, this is crazy. Like, I don't know what I'm doing. How did I get here? Like, I'm not qualified for this. And they continue to sort of be in that position up to the point that their company is valued at like $2 billion or more. But when you are kind of coming from that place, it really is just a total toss up and totally up to luck on whether you are going to make it or not. So we sort of came into the game knowing nothing, knowing no one, just being like super passionate and wanting to learn and hungry and all of those things that are like good qualities that will definitely take you far. You just don't know how far. And for us, I think that we made a lot of kind of classic mistakes with our fundraising. We made a lot of classic mistakes just with our product launch and our go-to-market and our like pricing model. Like there were a lot of things that we were just trying to figure out all at once that we made mistakes on. And I think that for most businesses, investors are super forgiving of this. Like they know that you're just figuring out. But for us, the reason that it was a lot less forgivable, I guess, is because our market was incredibly saturated and the barriers to entry were really low. So at the same time that we were kind of coming up with this novel idea of flexible benefits, there were like 20 other companies in the same space and more coming up constantly. And even now, I get messages from people who are about to start a flexible benefits company and they want my opinion or advice. So this concept is a really popular one. And the concerns that investors had were like, why is it gonna be you and not this company or this company or this company? And we honestly did not have strong answers for that. We did our best. I think that we had reasonable answers that maybe would have flown were it not like starting to be COVID times and a lot of other concerns sort of coming into people's minds. But yeah, the combination of a lot of things, similarly to how I said there was sort of like a confluence of things that helped us get off the ground, there were also a confluence of factors that just really kind of stood in our way at the end and made it difficult for us to actually raise funds. I think that a lot of the time at Dover right now, all of our founders are second-time founders. And that's a really good place to be starting a company. Like once you've already sort of had that experience, you suddenly know so much more about how this all works. And I think that, you know, if I were to start another company today, I would probably just be in a much better place to do that. So yeah, I don't think that I would actually do anything differently because it was all very valuable for my learning and getting me to where I am now. And I think kind of the only thing that I could have done differently was just know more at the outset, which is impossible. So it's hard to say. But yeah, I think for us, it was a lot of luck that got us to where we were and then kind of like took us out.
Gotcha. And one of the anonymous questions here is asking, so, and I think they're referring to how, you know, the employee perks market was really saturated. They're saying, you know, what made it a really crowded space?
Yeah, so what made it a crowded space? I think that, you know, we were seeing the rise of remote work. It wasn't as explosive, obviously, as it is now, but that was on the rise. Simultaneously, the conversation about diversity and inclusion was becoming more at the forefront. And hiring at that point as well was a lot more competitive. So companies, tech companies in particular, were like desperate to figure out ways to attract engineers. And there were sort of like a perk mania happening. So you might have seen lists of like the craziest benefits that companies offer, but some of the top companies go really far. They will, I'm trying to think of like some of the crazier ones that I've heard. They will basically like pay for your gym membership. They'll pay for your dog walkers. They'll have a chef in the office, like cooking gourmet food. They'll wash your car. They'll do your laundry, like just crazy amounts of stuff. And I think that we saw that this was happening and we saw that it's challenging for remote startups to have perks. And it's also challenging for like the average startup that doesn't have this budget to have perks and benefits. And so there was a space for a solution like this to basically come in and make that more accessible. And I think that just a lot of people kind of had that idea at the same time because of these conversations sort of being at the forefront. And then this new credit card technology that like Stripe and Brex and Marqeta were sort of putting out there that we're going to allow for this sort of thing to happen. So yeah, I think it was just a combination of like trends and the enablement of this technology to exist that made it so more companies were sort of popping up and addressing this. And the barrier to entry was just really low. So if you are going to sort of pick something to work on, you want to have a very unique competitive advantage or a reason why no one else could do this. And we didn't really have something like that.
Gotcha. And another question by another anonymous person asks here, did you, you know, with Cherry, did you consider acquisition options?
Yes. So at the end, we did actually get a term sheet for our seed that was later pulled back because of the circumstances of COVID. And at that point, we saw like, okay, we've spoken to so many investors. We had this situation happen. Let's see about an acquisition. And at the time, I don't think I can disclose the actual company, but I'll just say like, you know, one of these like HR unicorn companies that has like a $1 billion plus valuation was interested in potentially adopting Cherry and integrating it into their product. And so those conversations were just starting to happen. But as COVID like became a more serious issue in America, like right around March, that company's business was severely affected because the companies that they were servicing were small businesses as well. And so they sort of went into crisis mode, and, you know, conversations about an acquisition could just no longer happen. I think, you know, in a weird way, after we announced that we were shutting down, we had all of these offers for acquisition, but by that point, it just didn't make sense. And acquisitions are tricky things to negotiate and actually kind of create like a situation that's going to make sense and be valuable for the founders and the investors. And we just didn't kind of want to go through that process at that point.
Definitely sounds like a bunch of unfortunate circumstances, but I guess, you know, regardless of that, you learned a lot. And I guess looking at it, another more question of looking back, you know, what do you think is something essential that, you know, you'd suggest every young entrepreneur to learn?
Yeah, I think it is important for every young entrepreneur to really learn about their users. It's so easy to sort of get swept up in knowing about investors and financing and, you know, these sort of like tech crunch and like the things that are really glitzy and glamorous and exciting. But at the end of the day, like, you could definitely focus on that and be a founder who like raises a shit ton of money, but like never really has a product that makes an impact in the world or is adopted by users. And it's just more of like a random circumstance. But if you're a founder who really is in touch with your users, you have a lot of empathy for them, you understand them inside and out, you can talk to them, you have these unique insights on them that no one else has, that is super valuable. And whether or not you raise money, you can create a profitable business by just really having user empathy and listening, and just building things and iterating in ways that delights your users. So I think that that's the most important thing.
Gotcha. Thanks for sharing. And I guess kind of moving on to, you know, Dover, you know, coming off of Cherry, what kind of journey led you to Dover?
Yeah. So when we decided to shut Cherry down, my immediate next concern, of course, was like, okay, what do I want to do now? I left my first job because, you know, I didn't like being kind of siloed into this area, and I wanted to have more impact. And I didn't want, I mean, it's not discrimination. I didn't want to just kind of like deal with being like the young one and like not really being able to have any authority. So that was a concern for me. And I really wanted to find a company that I was going to really enjoy working at, with people that I really liked and respected, and be working on a product that I thought was going to have an impact in the world and in a role where I could do a lot of things. So my standards were high. And I knew that. And the way that I went about finding Dover was really just through my network. So I started out by just kind of asking my friends, my family, and my acquaintances, like people I hadn't spoke to in a long time, to just get on the phone with me. And whenever we did get on the phone, I just kind of chatted with them about like, here are my skills, here are my interests. What do you think? Like, where do you see me? What are the roles that you think I would be good for? Like, give me some guidance. And it was through those conversations that I started to kind of build up the idea of, you know, maybe working in people operations or being a chief of staff. And once I had that really figured out, I spoke to chiefs of staff, and I spoke to as many people as I could about kind of trumpeting out there, like, I'm looking for a chief of staff role. Once I had my mind made up about that, like I wrote an article, I posted on forums, and I just did everything I could to really get out there to my community that this is what I was looking for. And that really helped me. So the way that I ended up finding Dover was through posting a forum that I was looking for a chief of staff role. And then our founder reached out to me. But really just being super public about this and asking my network for help, putting out what I wanted, got me like 30 different interviews. So, you know, you can't be shy. I think networking can sometimes just be like, and really intimidating. But, you know, even just starting small will get you really far. I even hired someone at Dover recently who was a super old connection that I haven't spoken to in years, reached out to me looking for a job. So you got to start somewhere. And in general, I think that networking is the right way to find good jobs.
Mm-hmm. I guess kind of on finding that job topic, was there ever like a moment where you considered going to, you know, a Google, Facebook, big type of company, or were you only ever looking for, you know, a startup?
Yeah, I think that, you know, I didn't completely X that out, you know, or rule that out in my mind, but it definitely wasn't like the most appealing thing to me in the world. I felt like if I did that, or if I went the super big company route, I was going to be putting myself into a really small role, which I didn't really want to do. I didn't want to specialize in anything yet or brand myself as a marketer or a salesperson. I wanted to keep myself really broad. And I felt like the best way to continue to learn about businesses and business functions in a super hands-on way and get the direct experience and have the responsibility basically that like you normally would never have as a 25-year-old is to work at a startup, because that's where yeah, you're just going to be kind of handed the most tasks, and that's where you can really learn about yourself and learn about businesses and what it takes for them to be successful. So I think in the future, you know, I would be open to working at a large company, but it wasn't the right move for me for now.
Mm-hmm. I guess a bit about, you know, Dover's culture. I guess, is there anything, you know, really unique, like any unique mechanisms, or, you know, what, I guess, what's something very unique about Dover's culture that you really enjoy?
Yeah, I think that Dover is really excellent about creating a culture that attracts just really excellent candidates, and we have an incredible team. So I think that the team is definitely the best benefit about working there. There is just a high level of trust that like reverberates throughout the company. The organization structure is super flat. So it's pretty much, you know, the founders and then everyone else. So everyone is working directly with the founders. Everyone is working very cross-functionally. Everyone is exposed to a lot of things. People pretty much set their own hours. Like we don't work with deadlines. So there's just so much flexibility and trust that is built into what we do every day, because we just believe in hiring smart people and like letting them dictate what they do, and putting that trust in them. So simultaneously, like you get to kind of run your own show, but learn from these incredible people who have amazing backgrounds and were founders themselves or consultants or, you know, went to amazing schools. So I think that that is one of the ways that Dover is really great. And even as a startup with about, you know, 20 or so people, we've managed to have really like good processes. A lot of startups kind of like don't have their shit together when it comes to onboarding or feedback or, you know, career paths, but that's something that we've been thoughtful about. And I think that that's also really appreciated by everyone here.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, you mentioned scaling, and, you know, even as a 20 person startup, I'm assuming that's not where you guys are, you know, looking to stay at. I guess, what future plans do you have, or what, you know, there's always the challenge of scaling culture with
Yeah.
large numbers of employees. You know, how do you kind of plan to tackle this?
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, the team I think has pretty much doubled in size since I joined, which was like 3 months ago. I think I was basically the 10th person, and now we're at 20, which is crazy. And we have, I think, 10 roles now open on our site. And yeah, anyone who is like looking for an internship or a role should apply. But I think that that question about scaling culture is something that we're working on actively, in terms of, you know, making sure that the team is like connected and friends. We do have a lot of virtual events that we'll do to, yeah, just like keep the team like close and friends with each other. But I think that the best way that we can scale our culture is to continue to have that high hiring bar. And we also just really value every single person's feedback. So, we have an intern whose last day is tomorrow, and I actually just did an exit interview with her. So really every person at every level in this company, we see their feedback as super valuable. And, we wanted to learn from her about where are the areas that we can improve our culture. So having it be something that every single person has a say in and feels that they're a part of and feels that they influence, is important, and something that we're going to preserve as we scale up.
For sure. Thanks for sharing, your thoughts on workplace culture. And I guess one question from is, what advice, would you give for someone new, new to the scene, looking to just start a company, like right now, during this time?
Yeah, I think that, my advice would be like, don't overthink it. Like, I can't believe I'm about to say just do it, but yeah, genuinely, like, just do it. I think that there's like no better experience that you can have than just like figuring it out. One of the main values that you need to have of being a founder is show up and figure it out. Like, learn how to do as much as you can with as little resources. There's a lot about being a founder that's just being scrappy and like rolling with the punches. And I think that when people try to like get it just right and really analyze and figure out like the perfect opportunity and all of these like specific plans of things, like, it just kind of gets in the way. And if you're going to be a founder starting from day zero, you have to be so creative and leave yourself a lot of room for flexibility and changing plans and pivoting. So really my advice would just be to start today and like start something small and let it build from there. And just know that all of the lessons that you learn are going to serve you in whatever way, whether it's, this startup is going to take off or it's not, and you're going to start another one in the future. It's one of the most like high agency, valuable learning experiences that you can ever have. So I think everyone should have the experience of starting their own business at some point.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. Another a question from our audience now. Michael Wellsome is asking, what did you receive your bachelor's in?
Yeah, so this is another example of like having no clearly defined career path for a while. I went to NYU Tisch originally, so I was planning on majoring in acting, and I ended up switching out and getting my bachelor's of science in nutrition and a minor in child and adolescent mental health development. And both were really interesting to learn about, but obviously not using either in my day-to-day life at work, at least. So yeah, that's kind of part of my thesis on like, just experimenting with a lot of different things, and it's okay to not have a plan and you'll still end up okay.
Gotcha. And I guess kind of going on that topic, it definitely seems like there's a lot of specific things in college that you don't necessarily use in your day-to-day life. But, was there any big things that you did end up taking from your experience in college?
That's a good question. I think like the good thing about college was just sort of, preparing you to kind of be an adult, living on your own, making your own friends and, kind of shaking up like your social life, having relationships, like all of those things really help you as you get older and as you do enter the workforce. If you have the opportunity to do internships and just get exposure to businesses, that's really great. So yeah, I learned so much during college, being in a city, and then just kind of all the things that happened in my personal life at that time. And all of those things like really did serve me as a person and in my professional life to this day. In terms of like actual classes that I took, maybe not, but I still think that, having the experience of college, having a degree, like having like a good brand name school helps you a lot as you go through the workforce, and to just sort of like build up your credibility as a person with your personal brand in the early days of your career. So it's definitely worth it. Yeah, I wouldn't encourage anyone to drop out or anything like that.
Yeah, thanks for the advice. And I guess kind of to end, on a different note, I did want to talk a bit about your philanthropic interests that you listed on your website. I guess, you put food security as, one of your biggest interests. I guess if you want to talk a bit about it, what do you think makes this problem worth solving?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, that actually is one of the things that I guess I did sort of take away from my major. I learned a lot about, school food basically. And I think that this is true for colleges as well. Not the most nutritious or nutrient valuable foods that are sort of being put in front of young people. And this is very challenging and something that I care about because as well, there are so many like children in America that have a lot of food insecurity. So they don't know where their meals are going to come from. And they really rely on school to be that place where they get food. But oftentimes schools will only do lunch. And then the lunch, of course, is like not very healthy or sustainable. So I do really care about both of these things and always looking for ways to get involved. I think the three sort of things on my website that I post as causes that I care about are there because I'm always like inviting in ways to be involved. So yeah, I guess if anyone has resources they can point me to or like charities to get involved in, I would love to learn about that.
Yeah, awesome. Oh, and we just got a question from the audience. Would you say, and this is from Tristan Sean, would you say most of your knowledge comes from experience, from mentors, or from academic materials, or a mix of the three?
Yeah, I think that basically this is something that like switches over time. So when you're really young, I think that most of your experience comes from materials. As you get a little bit older, you have some mentors and people around you to guide you. And that really becomes like your main source of information and help with decision making. And then I think right around the age that I am is when you start to have enough perspective and enough life experiences that you actually can start to just like rely on yourself and see how your experiences served you. And you just have enough time sort of past college where it makes more sense sort of how everything built into each other. And so yeah, for me at this point, I value my own experiences and my own insights and intuition and opinions on things above anything else. And kind of academic materials and mentors still play a valuable role for me, but it's much more secondary. But I think that that's just kind of a natural transition that happens as you get a little bit older.
Gotcha. So I guess there's no more questions from the audience. And I just want to quickly say, thank you so much, Gillian, for taking the time to, come on here and give a chat. Just a heads up to everyone, we'll be posting a YouTube link on the Discord. You can access it from there. And in addition, and feel free to share it with your friends. In addition, Dover is hiring. They're looking for interns, as Gillian mentions. So please check them out. I think Ronak sent a link in the chat. We'll probably put it in the video description as well. But yeah, thank you so much, Gillian, for coming on today.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me. It was great chatting with you all.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. Bye.
Bye-bye.